Hi everybody, Captain Al speaking with your training tips designed to help make you a better, more knowledgeable flight simmer, pilot, or aviation enthusiast. Have a seat, let's strap in and stow the HUD and see what is on the horizon for today. Our briefing today will cover the interior and exterior lighting of the 747-400. One of the things we want to do is early on is adjust our lighting. If necessary, we would do the safety check. Most of the time the airplane is powered up already when you get on board. But if necessary, we could start from a cold, dark airplane and do the safety check and establish AC power. It's usually at that time that you want to adjust the interior lighting prior to doing your preliminary pre-flight procedure so that you can see. Some of the interior lighting we're going to look at adjusting and setting in the virtual simulator would be the overhead panel and circuit breaker lighting, the Glareshield panel and floodlights, and the aisle stand panel and floodlights. These are the three main areas that will light up the flight deck. We'll also be looking at the use of storm and dome lights as necessary. We'll be looking at the outboard and inboard display unit lighting for the PFD and the ND, and we'll be looking at the forward instrument panel flood lighting for the captain and the first officer. Then we'll be looking at some of the exterior lighting of the airplane, the navigation and strobe lights, the taxi and runway turnoff lights, and the inboard and outboard landing lights, along with the upper and lower beacon lights, the wing illumination and logo lights, and then we end up doing the looking at the test light switch for bright and dim, and that tests all our light indications on the flight deck. So let's go to the virtual simulator. Okay, here we are in the virtual cockpit, and the flight deck is dark right now. It's unpowered, so we're going to do the safety check. Again, if you haven't watched the video on the safety check or the electrical power-up procedure or the preliminary pre-flight procedure, be sure to watch that video briefing because it goes into detail on the aspects of powering up the airplane and then doing the preliminary pre-flight procedure. So we'll do the safety check. We'll turn the battery switch on, standby power to auto. Hydraulic demand pumps are all off. Windshield wiper switches are off. Alternate flaps are off. The selector and the arm switch is off. Landing gear lever is down. And the flap handle is up. And the up indication is green, so they agree. And then we'll go back upstairs for the bus tie. Switches are all in auto, and that completes the safety check. Now we can establish AC power by bringing on external 1. And since we're a passenger airplane, we'll also bring on external 2 as well. Now you notice everything is pretty well dark. So first thing we'll do is we're going to talk about the interior lighting, then we'll talk about the exterior lighting. The interior lighting, a lot of it is on the bottom row here of the overhead panel. Going from left to right, the first switch is the storm switch. If I turn the storm switch on, that'll bring on all my dome lights and the floodlights at maximum intensity. If we scroll up a little bit, we'll see that up on the P7 circuit breaker panel, just to either side of that, are 2 of the dome lights. There's a total of 4 dome lights on the flight deck, and 2 of them are right here. This is what's shining to give us all this light. In addition, the floodlights come on at their max intensity as well. Let's go back down and turn off the storm lights. And let's go down a couple switches to the dome rotary switch, which is right here. We'll turn that up partially. You can select your dome lights to whatever brightness you desire. In this case, I'm not turning them up all the way, just partially. If I do turn on the storm switch, that's going to override the dome light switch. So anytime I turn the storm switch on, the lights go to maximum brightness, even though the dome switch is not calling for maximum brightness. This switch overrides this switch when it's on. We'll go ahead and turn off the storm switch. And we'll bring the dome lights all the way up. The next, actually, let's turn these down. You can probably see it better with the lights out here. The next switch over is the circuit breaker and overhead panel rotary switch. So we'll start rotating that to the right, and you'll see that the integral lights, or the background lights for the overhead panel, are illuminating so you can see. As well, if we scroll up to the P7 circuit breaker panel, you'll notice that the circuit breaker lights are also illuminated via that switch. And if we kind of rotate around here down to behind the first officer's chair, you can see that the P6 circuit breaker panel is also illuminated. So that one switch illuminates the P6, the P7, and the overhead panel as well. Go back to the overhead panel. Now we'll take a look at the Glareshield. There's two switches to the Glareshield. There's an inner switch and an outer switch. The inner switch will control the floodlight portion of the Glareshield, and the outer switch, the bigger switch, will control the background or integral lights, or what's called panel lights here. So let's turn up the outer switch first. So that's going to turn on the integral lights, or the background lights, or the panel lights for the Glareshield. Now where's the Glareshield? Well, it's right down here. This is the Glareshield, where you have the EFIS control panels, the mode control panel, and the display select panel. This whole area is now illuminated. You'll notice just the background lights, or the panel lights, are illuminated with the outer switch. We go back upstairs. Now we'll go ahead and turn the inner switch, which is the smaller switch. The little inner switch, will rotate that. That controls the floodlight. So as we continue to turn it, we'll go full brightness on it. And then if we go down to the Glareshield, we'll notice now that the floodlights are on, as well as the background lights. And you can see, we can see it very well now. In addition to the panel lights, you've got floodlights on now. The aisle stand, which is where the thrust levers are, and the radios, and weather radar, and all your audio control panels, all that stuff. This is the switch for that. Again, you've got an inner and an outer switch. The inner is the smaller switch, the outer is the bigger switch. The floodlights for that, if we scroll up a little bit, on the P7, above the smoke vent handle, you'll see right here, these are the floodlights for the aisle stand right here. This is what's going to come on when we turn on the floodlight. So let's go ahead and take the aisle stand outer switch first. We'll go ahead and rotate it. Looks like it might already be rotated. Looks like it was. Rotate that all the way to the right. And that's going to control our background lights, or our integral lights, as they're called, or the switch calls it panel lights. So let's go down to the aisle stand. We'll take a look. And sure enough, our background lights are illuminated for the thrust quadrant and down also for the radios. You can see there's no floodlights, but we have panel lights. Let's go back up to the overhead panel. Right there. And we'll scroll up a little bit. And let's go ahead and turn on the floodlights now for the aisle stand. And we'll turn them on max intensity here. And if we scroll up now, you'll see that that floodlight is now illuminated on the P7 circuit breaker panel above the smoke vent handle. Right here, this is the floodlight that shines on the aisle stand. So if we go down to the aisle stand, sure enough, we have floodlights. Actually does a nice job illuminating that, pretty bright. Of course, we could turn those down if we want to. So now we have background lights and integral lights illuminated. Go back up to the overhead panel. And let's turn on let's turn on the storm lights now. And that looks like it for the interior lighting up here. Let's go down here and we'll move over to the captain's lighting here. Actually, you know what? Let's turn off the storm lights. You can see better when what's lighting up. Yeah, that's good, because now it's all dark down there. So let's move over to the captain's side panel here where we have lighting as well. These switches, there's actually outboard, they call them CRT because this was the original airplane had CRT cathode ray tubes. Even if they have LCDs now, they still call this CRT. They've never modified this. If you turn the outboard switch, if you rotate that to the left, you'll notice that the brightness of the outboard CRT will dim, which is the PFD. And so I've got it all the way down now. If you still see silhouettes, it doesn't dim it completely. If I go back to the right, we'll increase the brightness of the outboard CRT. The inboard CRT, or in this case LCDs, I have LCDs here. There's an inner switch and an outer switch. The outer switch is the bigger switch. That will control the lighting for the ND itself. If I turn it down, go ahead and turn it down, you'll see that the inboard display unit is now going dimmer. And let me go ahead and turn it up. And now you'll see the inboard display unit is getting brighter. The inner switch here doesn't seem to do anything, but the inner switch is for weather radar returns. If you have weather radar returns, if you have the weather radar on and you have returns, you can control the weather radar brightness with the inner switch. That's what that's for. The map switch is for your rotary map light. You have to pull it out. And if you pull it out and then that pushes it in, that pulls it out. And then of course we can turn that down or turn that up. We'll go ahead and turn it up. And that's going to control the map light, which is, maybe we can find it here. What would that be? Up here, there it is. Right there. There's your map light. This is a kind of a cylinder light with a beam coming down. And you can actually control the swivel here of this light. You can rotate it to the right, clockwise or counterclockwise, and the beam will go narrower or wider depending on what you're trying to see. So if you want a lot of light, you can make the beam go wider. If you want to really focus the light in, you can make it go narrower. It's got a swivel. It is swivels. The whole thing swivels back and forth and side to side. but you can also adjust the beam of the intensity. And that's where that is. Let's go back down and over. And we'll push that map switch back in. And then you've got your panel lights here. Again, inner and outer switch. The outer switch controls the background lights or the panel lights or the integral lights. You can call them any one of those things. And the inner switch will control the floodlight. And you notice when I rotated that, now I have lighting for my instrument source select switches, my clock, my inboard CRT and lower CRT switches are illuminated. So you've got some panel lights here. Now I'm going to bring on the floodlight portion of that, which is the small inner switch. And notice now we're getting floodlights as well. The floodlights actually, and the panel lights, for the captain, he controls pretty much over to the gear handle. So you can see all these panel lights came on when you turned that light. Let's see if there's anything else over here I want to talk about. No, not really. So let's move over to the first officer side. And notice it's dark from the gear handle all the way over. That's what he controls. So again, he's got a map switch. You can pull his map switch out. You can push it in. You can rotate it to the right or to the left. Turn it down. Turn it up. Panel lights again, inner, outer switch. Inner is smaller, outer is bigger. We'll go ahead and take the outer switch and rotate it to the right. And notice the panel lights are getting brighter and brighter and brighter. So that controls the background lights of the clock, instrument source select switches, his inboard and lower CRT switches. Notice he controlled these lights, the panel lights for the gear and the alternate gear and the alternate flaps. Now we can go ahead and take the inner switch, and that's going to be the floodlight portion of it. So now we'll increase the brightness of that, and notice the floodlights are coming on now. Boy, and they do a heck of a job of simulating this as well. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Looks pretty darn good. Let's see, I think that's it. Now you also have the switches down here for the outboard. Move over a little bit so we can see it. For the outboard switch, again, that's the brightness of the PFD, and the inboard switch is for the ND. And again, there's a small inner switch, and that's for weather radar returns on the ND. You'll notice also that on the ICAS you've got brightness controls as well. You've got an upper ICAS brightness control. You can certainly turn that down, I think. Let's see. Should be able to turn that down. Let's see. Yeah, there it goes. So I'm decreasing the brightness of the upper CRT or display unit. Again, it's an LCD, but they call these things CRTs, the nomenclature. And then rotate it to the right to increase the brightness. There's also one for the lower. And go ahead and bring something on. Let's bring the fuel synoptic on. So again, there are two switches here, inner and outer. The outer switch will control the display itself. And there's a little inner switch that is for weather radar returns. If you were to move the ND down here, let's say the PFD, if the outboard CRT on the captain's side failed, and the PFD moved to the inboard CRT, well, you could take your inboard CRT or your lower CRT switch and move it to ND. and then that would move the ND down here. When the navigation display is down here, you can then control the weather radar returns via this little inner switch. So if we were to, let's say the PFD, you can see the PFD here. If for some reason the PFD failed, if the outboard CRT failed, the PFD is going to move over here. We could take our lower CRT switch and move it to ND, and the ND is now down here. And then what we can do is this little switch, the inner switch, controls the weather radar returns when you have weather radar down here. The outer switch will control the brightness of the lower CRT. And you'll notice that the ICAS compacted now, and actually since we had the fuel synoptic on, the fuel synoptic compacted. It's pretty impressive that they even have that. So it should be engine, fuel, and gear. Engine, fuel, and gear. Pretty good. Doors, no. Hydraulics, no. But these three, engine, fuel, and gear, should be compacted synoptics. It's pretty good. Pretty amazing fidelity that they've incorporated in this. We'll go back to normal there. There's also brightness for the CDUs. You can turn your brightness down, and turn your brightness up, a little rotary selector for the captain or the first officer, so you can control the brightness of all this stuff. You can also control the brightness of the ISFD. Right here. You've got the little plus and minus switches, so if you go minus, that's going to decrease the brightness of the ISFD, and if you go plus, that's going to increase the brightness. Increase the brightness or decrease the brightness of the ISFD. And again, I just find it amazing that this all works. Heck of a job, PMDG. They do a magnificent job on the fidelity of this simulator. Anything else? I think that's it for the interior. Let's go up. Let's go back up to the overhead panel, and we'll scroll up a little bit. We're going to look at some of the exterior lighting now. And now I think now we can turn on the storm switch. Let's turn on the storm lights. Get a little better perspective of things. Let's turn on the nav lights first. And we'll go outside the airplane. We're outside the airplane now. And we're going to take a look at the... I'll kind of swing around here and take a look at the nav lights. When you turn the nav light switch on, and most of the time it is on, you're normally going to get your left red light and your right green light, and the back of the airplane, the white lights, illuminate nav lights. On the 747, there's actually two bulbs for the red, two bulbs for the green, and two bulbs for the white. And you'll notice here that PMDG actually simulated that. And that's pretty darn cool to me. And we'll kind of zero in on this to see it a little better. Let's go, oops, down, forward. You can see, look at that. There's two nav lights in there. Two bulbs for the nav lights. Two red, two green, and two in the tail, two white. I'm not sure what this little white light is here. It could be just to illuminate it even better. On the Dash 8, there is a wing, I forget what they call it. There is a light out here that's an additional light, but on the 400 you don't have that light. I forget what they call it on the Dash 8. But I find it amazing they have the two bulbs out here. That's pretty cool. Let's go back inside. Yeah, let's bring the strobe lights on. Let's go back outside and look at that. There's three strobe lights. There's two, again, nav lights, two, and two. And the strobe lights, there's 3 of these. You can see the one on the left wing tip. Go back. There we go. And let's see if we can get a view of the... there we go. You can see a little better here. You can see the 2 strobes on the left wingtip, right wingtip, and tail. We move, let's move back to the... There we go. And kind of take a look at this. I'll move down, and we'll move in. Left a little, keep moving in. Whoops, there we go. And we'll move down, there we go. Kind of take a closer look at this. Well, son of a gun if they don't have the 2 white lights for the nav lights, and then they have the strobe. See the APU tail cone. See if we can move in on this a little bit more. And let's move down. Okay, let's move in. And let's move to the left a little bit. And I'm trying to show something here, but it's not quite cooperating. That is pretty cool though. There's the strobe light right here. The 2 position lights for the tail. And you'll notice there's a little flange here. That kind of sticks out. It'd be hard to see because it's dark. But there is a little flange that sticks out here. I always ask people what this flange is for that's out there. And they usually say, well, it's for the a deflector for the APU exhaust. And I usually tell them, no, that's what erases the magenta line as you fly along. And that's a joke. And then they usually laugh, and it cuts the tension of an oral a little bit. So let's go back inside. And let's turn on the taxi light and the turnoff lights. And let's go back outside and look at those. And let's swing around to the front of the airplane. We can get there. Yep, there we go. So now we're looking at the, let's go down a little bit and let's move forward a little bit. Let's move left. Let's go in. Whoop. I get a little spastic with the buttons sometimes. There we go. Better view here. These are the 2 taxi lights. When you turn on the taxi lights, you get these 2 lights. When you turn on the turn-off lights, you get these 2 lights. The turn-off lights point 65 degrees either side of center. The taxi lights and the turn-off lights will extinguish automatically when they're in the air mode. Right now, they're in the ground sensing mode. So with the switches on, they'll illuminate. If you leave the switches on and you take off, as soon as you get in the air mode, the lights would turn off automatically, even though the switches may be on. Let's go back inside. We'll turn on the outboard and the inboard landing lights. And we'll go take a look at them. And let's move in on them a little bit. Oops. So you notice the inboard and outboard landing lights are on the wing root. 2 on each side. These lights are normally at their max intensity when the landing gear is down. When you retract the gear, these go to a more moderate intensity. If you happen to be looking out the window in the passenger compartment and it's night, you'll see the lights dim. They'll go a little bit dimmer as you retract the gear. Gear comes down, you'll notice they go brighter. Once the gear is down and locked, boom, they come on brighter. Let's go back inside. And let's turn on the beacon. I'll go to both. You notice there's 3 positions here. There's lower, off, and both. The lower position is if you want to turn off the upper beacon. If you go to lower, just the lower beacon would operate. The upper beacon would turn off, and that's in case you're in clouds, and it helps prevent vertigo. So if the beacon is bothering you when you're in clouds because of the flashing of the strobe, the flashing of the beacon, which is kind of like a strobe, you can turn off, you can disable the upper beacon by going to lower. Normally we'll leave it on both, unless, again, if it's bothering us, we can always go to lower. Let's go outside, and you can see that you can see the upper beacon here. There's the upper beacon right there. And then you can see the reflection of the lower beacon. And we'll go, let's take a look at that. Oops, let's go outside. There it is. So there's the lower beacon. Lower beacon right there. And upper beacon right here. And this is the one you can disable. You can turn off this upper beacon if it's bothering you in cloud. Go back inside, and let's see, is there anything else? Beacon, nav, strobe, we got that wing illumination light, we can turn that on. Let's bring the logos on. We'll go back outside and take a look at the wing illumination light, and you can see that right here. Let's zero in on that. The wing illumination lights will kind of illuminate the leading edge of the wing on the inboard section. There's not really too much of the wing you can see from the flight deck. In fact, if you strain your head all the way out the window, you could just barely see the wingtips. So you certainly can't see the inboard section from the flight deck. But if you were to do an inspection from the passenger compartment, and if we needed to check the leading edge, this illuminates, that light right there illuminates the leading edge of the wing, leading to mid section of the wing. Not so much the outboard section, doesn't quite go that far. But there's one on each side. Those are the wing illumination lights. And then, of course, the logo lights. The landing lights. You can kind of see it here. The logo lights are shining up lights that illuminate the tail. Obviously, everybody knows what logo lights are. Let's go back inside. And probably the last thing here would be the indicator light test switch. You can either go to the dim position, which would dim your go down here if you have any of your let's say let's just put let's bring a flight director in. Let's go L2 These lights right here are dimmed or bright with this switch. So right now we're in dim. If I go to bright and I go back and look at that switch, it should be, yeah, it looks like it's maybe a little darker. This actually goes pretty bright when you go to bright. I wonder if that changed. Did that change too much? Back to dim. Not that much, but it's apparent in the airplane. The test switch allows you to test all the indicator lights. And so if you press and hold it, you'll see that you get all the Not all the lights. You'll see that there are some switches that don't have lights in them, but you can test all the lights, including lights down here and lights down here and lights down here. I mean, they all will illuminate, including the overhead maintenance panel as well. I don't think I can do that all at once and show you that, but let's go back upstairs. What I can show you probably is that if I go to test and hold it, you hold it for about 10 seconds, these lights will all be bright, but then after about 10 seconds they will go to dim. Now let's see if they simulated that, PMDG. Right to somewhere in here they should start to go dimmer now. Let's see if I can move down and still hold that. Yeah, there's the 888s in the radio, so that's working. You can see all the lights here are loose. Oops. Trying to get too cute here. Well, normally when you go to test, and hold it, like you can see the lights in the start switch, and they would normally after 8 to 10 seconds they'll go dimmer automatically if you keep holding it, which I'm doing. So that's not simulated, it looks like. Right about in here you should see them all of a sudden go from bright to dimmer. And the start switch lights, the avail lights, everything would go a little bit dimmer. Yep, it doesn't quite do that. But hey, everything else is pretty darn good. So that'll complete the virtual simulator for the interior and exterior lighting. And thanks for watching. Okay, let's lower the HUD and go flying. Until our next briefing, keep the blue side up. Captain Al, out.